What up, B Squad? It is me, JB, and we are here today, you guys, with another review for Bel-Air. This is season 4, episode 3. You guys, this episode is titled, What Are You Doing for Thanksgiving? So, before we go ahead and get into it, if you guys are watching this video or any other video on the channel, and you guys are not subscribed to the channel yet, then I need you guys to do me a solid favor and start taking me out on this date and having me pay for it at the end of it. You guys know the routine. You can do me that favor by liking the video, subscribing to the channel, turning on your post notifications, you guys, and also by sharing the video. And with that out of the way, without further ado, let us discuss Bel-Air, shall we? So, episode 3, this is episode about Thanksgiving, obviously, hence the title. So, the episode, we open up and we are in court. And from the last episode, remember, Will and Carlton got arrested. So we're in court. So Carlton is, giving his plea to the, his last statement to the judge before sentencing. And so Will gets up as well and gives his last speech before the judge gives their sentence, right? So the judge heard what both boys said, and he decided not to send them to jail, right? But instead, he has decided to give them community service, and he has also let them know that they have lost their driving privileges, right? So we also see that Lou is in court, and I was wondering why we saw, because in the preview of this episode, we saw Lou at the courthouse, and I was like, I wonder why Lou is there. But I kind of figured, I'm like, maybe Lou is in this episode. So Lou is there because Vi had reached out to Lou to let Lou know about what's going on with Will. So Lou is there in a role of supporting Will. So Will was like, he's very excited to see Lou. And so he asked Lou, like, what are you doing for Thanksgiving? And so he invites Lou to the house for Thanksgiving. So we get to the house, and Will is extremely excited about Lou coming over for Thanksgiving. You can see Uncle Phil, because Uncle Phil and Lou are having a conversation, and you can look at Uncle Phil's face and you can see he's not really as excited as Will is for him to come over, right? Because he asked Uncle Phil about courtside, could they have some courtside seats to go see the Lakers? And so Will was like, maybe me and Lou can go see the Lakers. And so he also apologized to Uncle Phil. And Uncle Phil said, going forward, I want you to feel like you can lean on me, right? So we see as Aunt Viv is on the phone with Hillary. So Hillary is still in Costa Rica. The flights are grounded. So she's not going to be able to make it home for Thanksgiving. And Aunt Viv is upset that, Hillary is not going to be able to make it home. And so Ashley and Carlton are in the room. And, she's still upset about what Ashley did about getting into the fight at school with Olivia, stealing the liquor and all that stuff, right? And so that's weighing heavy on her. And Viv eventually left out the room, right? And Carlton was like, hey, Ash, let's have a conversation. And she was like, what's up? So Ash, he was like, how about we, take some of the pressure off of mom, and how about we all cook dinner together? And so we see as Uncle Phil, he went and told Vivian that, hey, we'll invite Lou to Thanksgiving, thinking that he can. So, and Uncle Phil, you could realize at this point, Uncle Phil is feeling a way that he feels like um, Will is thinking that he can lean on Lou a lot more than he can. But what I will say is, in this particular situation, he honestly can't. Lou has been to prison. Lou just had a run in with the law. So, yes, you can't give him any kind of advice because you've never been in that situation before. So we see as Jeffrey, he brought the turkey over and he left, saying that, he wasn't going to be able to stay with the family for Thanksgiving, right? And so we then see as Jeffrey went to a bar. So this episode, it went from past to present. So we went 18 years in the past, and we see Jeffrey at a bar. And so Jeffrey is joined by Uncle Phil. And this was the first time that they met each other, right? So now we're going to jump back into the present day. So present day, we see as the family is cooking dinner, right? Everybody had their things that they did. Will had something that he had to make. Carlton is making something. Viv made something. Ashley made something. And Uncle Phil was on the turkey, right? So we see as Uncle Phil's like he's getting ready to baste the turkey, and he opens the oven, and that turkey looked like when he first put it in, because it is when he first put it in. He didn't put he set the timer and everything, and he said how many, he said it for how long, what the heat should be and all that kind of stuff on, but he didn't end up turning the thing on. So Lou came in, and Lou was kind of cracking on him, and Uncle was like, you know what? I learned some stuff in prison. Like, we can fry this turkey. And so that's what they did. They ended up frying the turkey. Now, Uncle Phil and Lou are outside frying the turkey, and they are having a conversation. And this conversation between these two, it ain't going nowhere, because you can, again, like I said, you could tell throughout this episode that Uncle Phil was in his feelings about Lou being around, right? So Lou told Uncle Phil that, he and Vi are worried about Will, and I was like, whoa, 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 hold on, Lou. You don't get to come in here and have this conversation and be like, oh, you're worried about your son, which I'm not upset about it, but it's just like, I don't know if you are the person that can come in and say anything. I don't really know if you are that person, but hey, nonetheless, that's what he's saying, right? And he also let Uncle Phil know, like, hey, I need to have a conversation with Will, because I need to tell Will that I have a job opportunity in Philly. So we see Ashley. So Ashley is in this mood, and Carlton just wanted to have a conversation with her. And he was like, Ash, what's going on? And she said, you sound just like mom, because she wants to talk to me and she wants to ask, how is my day going and all this kind of stuff. Like, you really sound like mom. And so he was like, maybe she's just worried about you. I mean, you did steal some liquor from the house. She was like, Carlton, I'm not going to turn into a cokehead. No offense. And he was like, okay, Ashley, I get that. But he was like, with everything that she's going through, you need to be there for mom. Like, you're about to be a big sister, and I'm almost out the house. So do what you can to alleviate all stress on her, basically, right? And so then we see as Will and Lou. So they're in his room, and Lou was like, "You got a lot of J's," and he was like, "Yeah, Uncle, for every A, I guess like when he get A's on his report card, Uncle Phil, rewards him for that, right?" So then they're looking around his room. Will is talking about how people with him and Carlton getting in trouble, some of their investors are wanting to back out of Black right? And so he says that, Uncle Phil had told him about, investing in the stocks and all that kind of stuff. He even showed him some of the books that Uncle Phil had suggested that he read. And so Lou, you can see, look at Lou's face, and Lou can look, you looking at Lou and like, oh, you got a little bit of jealousy in you too, because you're realizing your son has a father relationship, but you knew this, but it's really hitting you that Will has that kind of relationship with Uncle Phil, right? So Lou suggested a book that Will read, and Will was like, okay, cool. So, Will called him dad, and he was like, wow, you call me dad? Because Lou was about to tell him about going to Philly, but he held off on that, right? And Lou, Will is sitting here making all these plans for him and for Lou. And I was like, oh, Will, you're gonna find out pretty soon. Your daddy ain't gonna be around all that long, but hey, it is what it is, right? So then we see as they got ready for dinner. So they're at the dinner table, and Uncle Phil is praying over the food, right? So then they ended the prayer, and then Lou decided that he wants to, insert a Bible verse in there. I was like, okay. So when Lou did that, then Uncle Phil decided to come back and insert another Bible verse. I was like, oh my God. So at this point, these two are taking shots at each other through the prayer, right? And Will has been like, okay, let's just sit down and eat. Like, we're good. So we see as Jeffrey is at the bar. So Jeffrey called Penelope, it went to voicemail. So he just is checking up on Penelope and Frederick, right? So then we move back to the past. And this is the first Thanksgiving that Jeffrey had with Uncle Phil and Vivian, and even a young Hillary. And Aunt Vivian was pregnant with Carlton, and she was due the next month, right? So they're living in this apartment, and um, we'll move. We move back to the present day, right? Now, at the present day dinner, Lou was talking about prison, and so Ashley asked him like, "What was prison like?" She like, "Cause my favorite show is Love After Lockup," and I was like, "Come on, look, Ashley," and Vivian was like, "That is not an age appropriate show for you." I was like, "You know what, Aunt Vivian, on that one, I will agree with you because I would not have my none of the young kids in my life. I would never have them watch that show. It ain't nothing to glorify, right? Same kind of how I feel about baddies and stuff, right? Like that, like the stuff that I watch. I wouldn't tell them to watch it. Wouldn't glorify it. None of that dumb shit. But moving on. So Lou just basically told them about how prison was, because even Carlson said, Lou, I do have a question about prison. Like, what was it like? Because Will and I, we could have very well ended up in that position. And Lou was just like, it is hard. You have someone who tells you what time to get up, when to eat, when to go to sleep, and all that stuff. But he said, but the hardest thing is knowing that you disappointed people on the outside. And I was like, okay, I'm here for Lou. It seems like Lou has changed a little bit, right? So then we see, and Lou is talking to Carlton about, like, I know you had it in you, Carlton, to defend your, protect you, protect and defend your boy. And he was like, big ups to you. And Uncle Phil and Aunt Vivian were like, we are not going to glorify that. And Lou was like, he mouthed thank you to Carlton under his breath, right? And so then we move on, right? And so we jump back into the past. So we see as Uncle Phil is, having a conversation with Jeffrey, because at this point he and Aunt Vivian were ready to move, but they couldn't move at that time because they didn't have the money to up and go to California. But that was his plan, to go to California to start the law firm with his friends from Harvard, right? And so they had been applying for bank loans, but they had been getting denied for every bank loan that they had applied for, right? And so then Jeffrey told them like, "You'll get there." So when we move back to the present day, so we see Lou. So Lou and Phil, they are still going at it with each other, right? And so, and really and truly, they're arguing about being what a good father is, right? So Uncle Phil was like, you can't even tell your son that you're leaving. And Will was like, what are you talking about? You're leaving. And the look on Will's face, Will was like super duper hurt and sad. And I was like, oh, poor Will. So we see as Will and Carlton are having a conversation about their dads, right? And I was like, I love the relationship with Will and Carlton. I love how it's grown from season one with them hating each other to now they are literally like brothers to each other, right? So then we see as Lou, he had a conversation with Vivian and he apologized for everything, right? But he told her, Phil just gets under my skin, he takes jabs at me. And Vivian was like, when are you going to take some accountability? He was like, what are you talking about taking accountability? She said, Lou, when you were with Vi and you and Vi would get into it, Vi would come to our apartment and sleep on our couch. And Phil would be the one that would defend you and tell her, he's, defend you and have her come back to you, because the one thing that you did do right was love that boy upstairs, right? So she was like, get your shit together. And he was like, there go that Smith girl, fire. So we see as Carlton went to go have a conversation with his dad, right? And Carlton is like, Dad, you remember the conversation that you had to me when Will first got here and how insanely jealous I was of Will and your relationship? And you told me that, we all have different things that we offer to other people, right? And he was like, maybe you should think about that when it comes to Will and Lou. So then we see as Uncle Phil. So he found Lou, and Lou was on the piano. He was like, "Did you learn that in prison?" He was like, "Oh, you got jokes, right?" So Uncle Phil's had an envelope in his hand, and he slid it across across the piano, and it was the Lakers tickets, right? And he told Lou like, "Hey, I'm not trying to replace you." And Lou said, I know. Lou said he wanted his own way of connecting with Will because he realizes that, you know, he and that Uncle Phil and Will, they connect through books and all, like they have their own way of connecting with each other. So I realized, I'm like, okay, so Lou just kind of feels out of place. And so when Will got in trouble with the cops, he kind of found that and saw that as a way of getting in and finding a way to have a connection with his son. And I was like, okay, I mean, I get it. I definitely get it, right? So Will came in, and so Uncle Phil was like, I'll give you guys some time alone. So he left out. So Will told Lou that, he gets why he's moving to Philly. And just because you're moving back doesn't mean that our connection has to stop. And Lou said, absolutely not. It doesn't mean that our connection stopped. Like, we don't keep going. And so Lou also told him, like, when it comes down to what Vi wants, so Vi doesn't want for Uncle Phil and Aunt Vivian to pay for Will to go to college. And I was like, now let me interject here how I feel about that. That I don't agree with 100%. Like, I don't like it when we feel like our kids got to get it out of the mud and stuff like that. I hate that. But I mean, do what you got to do. Do what you got to do. And so we'll move on from that, right? Now we see it's Ashley. So Ashley went to go talk to Aunt Vivian, and she apologized to her, and she told her she just wants to be there for her, right? But Ashley also let Aunt Vivian know that with school, she's just having a hard time. Like, she doesn't feel like she fit in with the queer kids. She also feels like she doesn't fit in with the black kids and all that kind of stuff. She feels like the only person who really truly gets her is Eli. So Aunt Vivian was basically reassuring Ashley of who she is and let her know that her people will eventually find her. And I agree with that, right? Because I remember being in high school, freshman year, you feel left out of place. And then I think the first few months of high school for me, I felt out of place because I still had my friends from high school, but I didn't have too many, not from high school, from middle school. I didn't have too many. I would see them throughout the hallways and stuff, but we didn't have too many classes together, and so I felt out of place being in classes with people that I didn't even know. But it took some time for me to eventually get to know people and form friendships and relationships. So yeah, Ashley, it'll definitely take time. You'll get there. Your people will find you, right? So then we see as Uncle Phil, and so we move back to the past, right? So Uncle Phil went to the bar and he let Jeffrey know that he got approved for a loan. However, he didn't apply for said loan, right? And so he asked Jeffrey, like, what did you do? Like, how did you make that happen? And Jeffrey just told him, don't worry about it, basically. And Jeffrey thanked Uncle Phil because he was in a bad spot on Thanksgiving because this is when he, had to let go of both Penelope and Frederick. So he thanks Uncle Phil for changing his life, right? So then we moved back to the present day. So Jeffrey got back home and Uncle Phil was eating at the on the kitchen counter. And so Uncle Phil asked him, like, why did you leave out earlier? And Jeffrey said, he just didn't feel right eating with the family with all that he has brought upon the family, right? And so Uncle Phil was like, the judge that Will and Carlton went before, that judge is known for giving out harsh sentences, right? So I'm assuming Jeffrey must have intervened and was on Will and Carlton's behalf to get them the lighter sentence that they got. And Uncle Phil told him, like, you always have a seat at our table. And so then we see his Uncle Phil went upstairs with Aunt Vivian. And so she was just talking about how simple things that were when they, lived in their apartment. And Uncle Phil's like, we're going to get back to simpler times, Viv. And he said, I have a plan. And so she was like, what's the plan? So he leaned in to tell her what the plan is. Although we're not privy to the plan, but that is the end of the episode, you guys. Feel free to let me know what you guys thought about it down in the comments section below. subscribe to the channel, turn on your post notifications, and share the video, you guys. And until the next time, stay safe, take care of yourselves, wash your hands, be blessed, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.